The very first thing the American public heard came straight from the White House. And the message was clear. This was a huge success, a miraculous rescue. It was framed as a triumphant story of American skill and determination. But as you're about to see, the details behind that bold statement are, well, they're not so simple. So to really get a grip on what's going on, we have to start with the official narrative. This is the story the Pentagon wants us to hear, an incredible tale of leaving no soldier behind. Now, when you look at the official timeline, you can see just how ridiculously complex this thing was. We're talking about a multi-day evasion, a massive logistical operation with C-130s literally setting up a temporary gas station deep inside hostile territory, and then a helicopter extraction. But it's where things went wrong. The plane getting its wheels stuck, the huge delay, and having to call in a 100-person quick reaction force. That's where the official story starts to get really complicated. So even though the official story ends with a successful rescue, when you start to look at the price of that success, some really serious questions pop up. Let's get into the numbers. $400 million. That's the estimated cost of the U.S. military gear lost or destroyed in this one operation. To put that in perspective, that's an absolutely staggering amount of money for a single mission. And that huge price tag wasn't just for the C-130 they had to blow up on the ground. No. The bigger operation saw multiple high-value combat planes either go down or have critical emergencies. We're talking A-10 Warthogs, another F-16, even a refueling tanker. This was not a clean in-and-out mission. It was an incredibly costly engagement across the board. And that brings us to the people involved. Look, the idea of leave no one behind is a sacred principle for the U.S. military. But the scale of this thing has a lot of people scratching their heads. 100 special operators? That's a serious ground force. Is that really standard procedure for rescuing just one person? For a little historical context, let's look back at Operation Eagle Claw in 1980. That was the last time a mission of this scale was even attempted in Iran. It also involved setting up a temporary base in the desert, but get this, the goal was to rescue over 50 hostages. So that really puts the numbers here in sharp focus. Using a similar-sized force to rescue just one or two people is exactly what has so many analysts questioning the official story. So if it wasn't just a rescue mission, even a massive one, what else could it have possibly been? Well, this is where a really compelling and frankly pretty unsettling alternate theory enters the picture. The biggest piece of evidence for this counter-narrative isn't the number of troops or the cost. It's the geography. It's all about location, location, location. So where exactly did all this go down? Okay, this is the absolute kicker. According to some reports, the pilot was actually down in the southwest of the country. But the huge ground operation, the C-130s, the 100 special operators, they were reportedly set up hundreds of miles away, just south of Isfahan, which just so happens to be one of Iran's most sensitive and important nuclear sites. This has led some serious foreign policy experts, not just conspiracy theorists on the internet, to suggest a pretty radical alternative. What if the rescue was just a convenient cover story for a much bigger, clandestine mission to try and seize nuclear material? All right, a uranium hunt is a massive claim, right? So, does this theory actually hold any water when we look back at all the weird details of the mission through this new lens? And when you compare them side by side, the difference is pretty stark. A pilot rescue is all about speed and a small footprint. But the tactics they used here, a huge ground force, heavy transport planes, setting up a forward operating base, that lines up way better with an operation to seize physical assets and hold territory for a while. And when you start layering on the other evidence, the picture gets even more interesting. First, the operation's location near Isfahan is just too convenient to ignore. Then there's the choice of aircraft, a two-seater F-15 Strike Eagle, which is often used for really complex deep strike missions. And finally, this all fits perfectly with the administration's very public, long-stated goal of stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon no matter what. So, look, regardless of which story you believe, the daring rescue or the failed nuclear hunt, this single event gives us a pretty sobering and honestly terrifying preview of what a wider conflict with Iran might actually cost. You could call this our first taste of what real ground combat in Iran would be like. It completely shatters any idea that the U.S. has total air control. The fact that they needed this much firepower and still took such heavy losses shows that any kind of ground war would be incredibly brutal and costly. And you have to remember, this isn't happening in a vacuum. This one mission really throws a spotlight on the immense strain the U.S. military is already under. We're seeing critical weapons being pulled from stockpiles that are supposed to be for other parts of the world, old planes being dusted off and brought back into service, and an all-volunteer force that's being stretched to its absolute limit. So that leaves us with the big question. Was this a daring rescue that just barely dodged a catastrophe? Was it a failed mission to grab nuclear material, covered up with a success story? Or was it something else altogether, maybe a full dress rehearsal for a future invasion? Whatever the truth is, this one very costly night in the Iranian desert serves as a stark warning about the dangers that lie ahead.